Written and directed by Xavier Gens, Frontiers chronicles the life of your average French citizen, Xavier being someone whose work you might recognise, due to him also directing 2007's Hitman, a movie about someone suffering with the effects of male pattern baldness. Frontiers, also from 2007, was his directorial debut that caused him to debut all over the scene with quite a splash. In that I mean, it falls under the genre of New French Extremity, movies about French people being a little over the top. The movie begins with the unfortunate sight of a baby, before seeing the baby carrier, Yasmin, who's 3 months pregnant, but plans very soon to be no months pregnant. It's because she doesn't know how numbers work. France is currently in the midst of a completely fictional and not realistic at all state of political unrest, resulting in violent riots and militarized police roaming the streets, something that could never possibly happen in France. A group of criminals have used this opportunity of political turmoil to conduct some criminality, which results in a shootout with the police, with a police officer being shot and one of their own being shot too. This group consists of Yasmin, her brother Sammy, the man who's been shot, Tom and Farid, and Yasmin's ex-partner and father of her unborn child, Alex. Their activities have amassed them 125,000 fake French monies from whatever illegal shenanigans they've been committing. With Sammy bleeding out faster than that kid with a nosebleed on sports day, they decide that the only thing they can do is take him to a hospital so that the doctors can shoot him in the other side of the body to make it look more symmetrical. A trip which ends up being completely in vain, as with his final breath, he tells Yasmin to keep the baby because once you lose it, it will be really hard to find it again. With Sammy dead and Yasmin doing a little bit of a cry about it for some odd reason, Farid and Tom drive out to the countryside to go and look at some birds or something, with Alex and Yasmin in a separate car on their way to meet them. They're headed out to the frontier, the French border between France and the real world. Tom and Farid arrive at a hostel way out in the middle of nowhere, which appears to be run by a man named Goetz and his sisters Gilbert and Claudia, who apparently take this hospitality thing incredibly serious, as they immediately take Tom and Farid to their room to make sure they know how to use the beds properly. It appears that Gilbert has a tattoo of an eagle and swastika on her back in a scene that I did not see coming, and neither did Farid or Tom for that matter, as they're taken downstairs to be refilled at the dinner table while they sit down to enjoy a nice family meal of slightly questionable meat of unknown origin, right after being inside slightly questionable meat of unknown origin. Goetz learns and seems to be taken aback by the fact that Farid is Muslim, before Tom calls the women whores for sleeping with him right away, right after he slept with them right away. Their brother Carl arrives and pulls a gun on the men for being left out of the fun, as he knows about the bag of cash that they brought with them, and is incredibly offended at its very existence, as he prefers the local currency of trading in chickens and goats. They punch Carl and make a run for it, but Tom is repeatedly and violently caressed all over his body with a metal pipe, before having his fingers politely removed with a bullet from Carl, because he has too many of them anyway. Using a pair of scissors, Farid proceeds to play a game of rock paper scissors with Carl's back, but incredibly wrong, before the pair take off in their car. They're followed by Goetz, who rams them off the road and into a pit, where he leaves them for dead. They survive the fall, and with nowhere else to go, they wander into the mine. As we see back at the hostel, the family have a collection of glasses, passports, car keys and phones from their countless other victims, because not only are they violent psychotic killers with bad tattoos, they're also hoarders, because what if they need to use it one day? A shot that is incredibly reminiscent of the pictures from the concentration camps that depict the items left behind by the murdered victims, like their glasses and shoes. Pictures that really show the sheer scale of the atrocities committed by a bunch of weirdos on meth. Yasmin and Alex arrive at the hostel, but instead of being taken to bed by Gilbert and Claudia, they're taken to a nearby cottage where they're told they have space for them. A cottage that seems to be cosplaying as a compound. Tom and Farid, still playing Minecraft IRL, find a tight and claustrophobic hole to climb into, and for some strange reason think that it's a good idea to get inside. A strange reason that they immediately regret, as Farid, using his video camera, turns around to see the eyes of someone following them, causing him to freak out and panic due to having an extreme phobia of eyes. Tom emerges from the passageway into a room surrounded by blood and guts, and is bludgeoned on the head by Hans, another member of the family. Farid backs up and out of the crawl space as the feet sniffer seems to have retreated, to suddenly find himself surrounded by what appears to be a group of people walking on all fours. Must be a French thing. At the rather funny looking cottage, Yasmin and Alex meet another woman, a fellow prego named Eva, while Yasmin notices that the room seems to be filled with some very questionable decor, inspired by that one Austrian guy who was very mediocre at art. A man then arrives who the entire family refer to as Father, von Geisler, a very German sounding name, for a very German man. His superpower is xenophobia, because he's a Nazi. In fact, the whole family has German-sounding names, because this movie revolves around a group of French people who forgot they were actually Germans. Alex had previously left to use the restroom, but while searching for that, he accidentally stumbles across the upside-down room and finds Tom hanging by hooks impaled into his feet. Despite the multiple and severe beatings that Tom has recently been subjected to, he's still somehow hanging on to life, like how those meat hooks are hanging onto his feet. And after trying to get Tom down but failing to, Alex runs back to get Yasmin, but is shot in the shoulder by Carl, who thinks that Alex could use an extra hole. You know, for like storage. After Alex is given a place where he can always store his car keys, Geisler tells Carl that he's going to keep Yasmin as a wife because apparently women are like Pokemon. You can steal them and do whatever you want. Back with Farid and doing his best impression of a dwarf and living underground, finds himself in another part of the mine, a storeroom where he finds dozens of the family's previous victims hanging around and generally not having a good time, as we finally uncover the origin of that slightly questionable meat. Tastes like chicken, so I've been told. After finding a woman and her not finding him back on account of being blind, Farid runs away as Carl and Hans come looking for him, and he hits Carl in the face with a sledgehammer due to confusing him for a piece of concrete. He runs away, but decides to take a well-needed break in the family sauna, causing Hans to get a little bit jealous and melting him alive because he wanted to use it. There's always one. As Farid is busy blowing off a bit of steam, Alex and Yasmin are restrained in a barn behind a group of pigs, with Alex managing to break Yasmin's chains free but not his own, because he's kind of a simp like that. They kiss and profess their love for one another, with Yasmin then rather romantically swimming her way through a pool of pig manure to get beneath the locked gate and escape. Once it's discovered that Yasmin has escaped and hasn't paid for her all-inclusive mud bath, Geisler has Alex face down on the floor, where he proceeds to use large bolt cutters to slice open both of his Achilles tendons to teach him a lesson about running away. The lesson being that next time he tries to escape, he'll have to do it via a walking handstand. Farid is slowly and painfully boiled alive, with him eventually being let out by Hans, leaving Farid looking like his face is melting off while simultaneously somehow being bloated and enlarged. Make your mind up, mate. Hans decides to put him out of his misery as Farid falls to the ground and Hans places the barrel of the shotgun to his back, and Farid is sent into the afterlife just how he lived in life, with his face falling off. Yasmin, who is now out of the building and running up the road, for some reason thinks that it's a great idea to flag down the very first car she sees, which just so happens to not be a great idea as it's Goetz from the Hostel, a man who she hasn't met yet. While after getting in his car, she certainly meets him and his dashboard repeatedly, and is taken right back to the house as her escape attempt has been in vain, unlike Alex's blood, which is no longer in his veins and pouring out of his Achilles. Using a Luger, Geisler decides to expand Alex's mind by blowing it right open, before Yasmin is taken away by the women to be given a wash, because girl you stinky. But while they're busy getting all up in her stink for a good whiff, they notice that she's pregnant thanks to the ultrasound machines that they have growing out of their hands. It turns out that this is actually good news for Yasmin, in that it's actually incredibly bad news for Yasmin. She wakes up, cleaned and restrained to a bed, before being paid a visit by Eva, who proceeds to start cutting her hair on the orders of Geisler. As a child, Eva was kidnapped from her family and used by the strange Germans for breeding to create the ultimate pure race. An ultimate pure race that kept being born with various genetic issues, forcing Eva to hide the kids underground due to Geisler wanting them eradicated. And with Yasmin already being pregnant with someone outside of the family, this is Geisler's new opportunity to have an heir. A funny way of saying raising someone else's baby, but it means she won't be killed because she's needed. And honestly, I don't know which option is worse. Yasmin is brought to the family dinner where she's served one of her friends, followed by Carl kissing her on the command of Geisler, which triggers something inside of her. Her baby begins operating her body like a fleshy human mech suit, and suddenly she lunges for a knife and holds it to Geisler's neck. Hans aims his gun at her, but is told to lower it in case he hits the senile old man with strange taste in dictators, but Hans fires anyway, hitting Geisler, causing Carl to retaliate by shooting him, killing two birds with one stone, as we see that Geisler has become the best kind of Nazi, a dead one. Yasmin makes a run for it as they discuss who will receive the family inheritance, where she's then forced to descend into the mines. She stumbles across the storage room to discover multiple of Eva's children feasting on some French cuisine, with Goetz entering the room behind her and swinging an axe around. Yasmin tackles him to the ground because she's better at rugby than he is, causing him to become enraged after being outplayed by a girl, where he proceeds to punch and kick her in the face, before turning on the table saw to flirt by showing off his carpentry skills. But while he's busy doing that whole whole evil villain speech thing, Yasmin grabs the axe, gives him a manicure, swings it into both sides of his neck, and pushes him backwards onto the table saw, where it becomes a goet saw. Carl comes across the body and Eva's children having one of their 5 a day, and sets off an alarm. Carrying a pickaxe in case she comes across any diamond ore on her travels, Yasmin gets back into the elevator, but Carl gets in too. The elevator starts to rise, and he holds it to the floor with the barrel of his shotgun, when suddenly his head explodes under the stress, because women can be a real handful. A woman named Eva, who happens to be holding a handful of gun, as she's just fired it at Carl to try and save Yasmin from the same fate that she was subjected to. She now has the opportunity to leave with Yasmin, but refuses to abandon her children, leaving Yasmin no choice but to leave without her. And while retrieving Alex's car keys from him as he's taking the big nap, Gilbert and Claudia appear and open fire, but miss absolutely every shot on account of being pretty bad. Yasmin fires at a group of gas canisters, resulting in Claudia receiving chunks of glass and pieces of shrapnel directly to the face and neck. Gilbert survives, quickly followed by Gilbert not surviving by proceeding to do the exact same thing that got Goetz killed. Yasmin is able to knock the gun out of her hands and tackle her to the floor, where she proceeds to aggressively French kiss the side of her neck. After killing her like some kind of strange French vampire lady, leaving Eva and her very adorable children behind, Yasmin drives away while clutching her baby, as all it took to convince her that she wanted to keep it was to violently end a bunch of fascists. But her fun is short-lived, as while she's driving away from the house, she's stopped at a police checkpoint by officers who were presumably looking for her and her group of friends, who thought that it would be a great idea to commit a violent crime. Now, before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons. The people who every month continue to go out of their way to show support towards the channel, something which I'm incredibly appreciative of. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or a patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great help, but you also get access to a few little cool perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to uncensored versions of all videos going forward. Starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to David, Loon96, Macy K1054, Stephen Todd, Kishjin Atapot, Gabriel Escalada, Luca, Keegan Neely, Anomaly, Jack Lane, Zuranto, Zane Monroe, KST, Sharka, Thy Lordship, Saskoy Dominic, Thomas Stewart, Simulation Flow, Benedict Martel, Mia, Kason Talbot, Captain Beans, TJ, Starlord, Dark, Galligan, Thunderstorm, Jordan Parker, Kristen Haskell, Die, Jennifer Delgadillo, One-Armed Shinobi, Snippling S, Hubert Saferga, Ben Cobfield, Tuba Goes Yeet, K, Sungaf Fandafarian, Beto the Chicken Guy, Pedro Manfrenate Martendel, Mano Ferrero, Lights Aida, Reigns VT, GB Hub, Mike Crane, and Crystal. Now heading over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to William Sillis, Vic Quoa, Sinner, Master Tank, VHS Soho, Lars Baker, Joseph Butcher, Aaron, Tristan Van Selm, Giacomo Milligan, Aaron Dix, Mark Ruffalo, Cameron Taylor, Dylan Russell, Lloyd Edwards, Oscar Slan, Nalu, Idle Mog, M, Toby6901, Serge Quickie, Buggy15, Wee Wee, Moss, Praline, Clementine Bostock, Briar Fletcher, Alexis Miller, Duco Stam, Chase Amerson, Trevin Duncombe, Brady, Luis Garcia, Richard Wiener, Angel P. Iglesias, 01, Cameron Captree, Amelia Gray, Dreadhead, LE1234, Amber, Chasefer, Callum Mitchell, Sylvie Devine, Sophine Hayek, Frank the Tank, Weldon, Basparol, Harrison King, Anxious Gamer 30, Commander Spleen, Christian Viordiak, Austin, Gary, Andrea Hernandez, Pavel, Rick Colby, Bossy, and Matei Pika. So once again, a big shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.